All right, looks like we're ready to tackle those worries head on. We're diving into Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Think of it as your guidebook for a worry-free life. It's packed with real-world examples and advice, not just theories.
What's fascinating is that Carnegie doesn't just offer surface-level tips. He combines personal anecdotes with psychological principles and historical examples, creating a surprisingly effective system for conquering worry.
He's got stories from everyone, business executives, prisoners, to famous explorers, showing how they tamed their worries. One of the first things that grabbed my attention was the magic formula from Willis H. Carrier, the man who invented air conditioning. I mean, talk about keeping cool under pressure.
It's a three-step process. That seems almost too simple. But it has deep roots in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's about taking charge by confronting your fear head-on.
First, you analyze the situation
Yeah.
and figure out the absolute worst-case scenario. Then you mentally accept that worst-case scenario. Finally, you calmly work to improve upon it.
What's brilliant about this is that it dismantles the cycle of fear. Instead of getting paralyzed by what-ifs, accepting the worst actually frees your mind to find solutions. It's like that Stoic philosophy of focusing on what you can control.
Carnegie shares the story of a New York oil dealer who was being blackmailed. The poor guy was losing sleep, couldn't eat, he was a wreck. Then he remembered Carrier's advice and asked himself, what's the absolute worst that could happen?
And he realized that even if his business was ruined, he could still find another job in the oil industry. It wasn't the end of the world. By accepting that worst-case scenario, a wave of relief washed over him.
That mental shift allowed him to think clearly and go to his lawyer, who helped him navigate the situation. And guess what? The blackmailer turned out to be a fake. His business was saved.
It's a perfect example of how shifting your perspective can unlock creative problem solving. Instead of being trapped in a spiral of anxiety, you can start taking action.
Now, another technique that really resonated with me is the idea of living in day-tight compartments. At first I thought, what does that even mean? But Carnegie's analogy of a ship's bulkhead really clicked for me.
It's like each day is a separate compartment. If one compartment gets flooded with worry, you can seal it off and prevent it from sinking your entire ship.
So we're not letting past regrets or future anxieties spill over and overwhelm us. We're dealing with each day as it comes. This reminds me a lot of mindfulness practices.
Exactly. And Carnegie tells this incredible story of a soldier named Ted Benjamino who was suffering from severe anxiety after World War II. An army doctor advised him to visualize his life like an hourglass.
And that was a turning point for him. Germino realized he could only control the present moment, just like only one grain of sand falls through an hourglass at a time. Focusing on that one grain, one moment at a time, helped him overcome his anxiety.
We can't change the past, and worrying about the future robs us of the joy of the present. By focusing on what we can do right now, we gain a sense of control and purpose.
Okay, and this next one is for everyone who's ever stressed over something that, looking back, seems totally ridiculous. Carnegie calls it, don't sweat the small stuff. And he illustrates it with this hilarious anecdote about Admiral Byrd and his men stationed at the South Pole.
Here they are, enduring some of the harshest conditions on the planet. And what are they worried about? Petty annoyances. One guy was obsessed with finding a seat in the mess hall where he couldn't see someone chewing too loudly. Talk about misplaced priorities.
It's almost unbelievable, right? But it highlights how easily we can blow these tiny things out of proportion and let them become huge sources of stress.
It makes you wonder, what are we stressing about today that we'll laugh about a year from now? We need to learn to differentiate between genuine problems and mere inconveniences.
It's all about gaining perspective, asking ourselves, will this matter a year from now, 5 years from now? If not, it's probably not worth losing sleep over. But what about those things we just can't control? Life throws us curveballs sometimes.
That's where Carnegie's concept of accepting the inevitable comes in. Fighting against things we can't change only creates unnecessary suffering. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows us to move forward and focus on what we can control.
It's like trying to swim upstream against a raging current. It's exhausting and ultimately futile. He shares this powerful example of a man who lost a finger as a child. This guy could have easily dwelt on his loss and felt sorry for himself.
But instead, he accepted his situation and focused on living a full life. He even developed a sense of humor about it, joking that the only time he missed his finger was when he tried to thread a needle.
That's such a great example of finding humor in adversity. It reminds me of Booth Tarkington, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author, who went blind later in life. Instead of despair, he focused on gratitude. For the years he had his sight.
He was grateful for advancements in medical science, grateful for the love of his family and friends. His attitude is a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, we can choose how we respond.
Okay, and this next one is a bit out there, but it's one of my favorites. Stop-loss orders on worry. It's like taking a page from the world of finance. You know, like when you set a stop-loss order to automatically sell a stock if it drops below a certain price. So you limit your losses.
It's a brilliant concept. Carnegie suggests applying this same principle to our worries. We can set limits on how much time and energy we invest in situations beyond our control. We're essentially putting boundaries on our emotional well-being.
He gives the example of a friend who was always late. Instead of getting frustrated every time, he set a stop-loss of 10 minutes. If his friend was more than 10 minutes late, he'd leave.
It's about recognizing when worry becomes unproductive and choosing to redirect our focus. It takes practice, but it's a powerful way to protect our mental and emotional energy.
I love that. It's like we're taking control instead of letting our worries control us. But how do we actually put this into practice? Like, what are some specific examples?
Well, let's say you're constantly worrying about work deadlines. You could set a stop-loss by deciding to only work on a particular project for a certain number of hours each day. Or, if you're feeling overwhelmed by news and social media, you could set a time limit for how long you engage with those platforms each day.
So it's about setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when those worries try to creep back in. But what about those times when worry feels completely overwhelming, like you can't even think straight?
That's when self-care becomes essential. Carnegie dedicates a whole section of the book to managing fatigue and stress, highlighting the importance of rest, relaxation, and finding healthy ways to cope with difficult emotions.
He even has a chapter on insomnia, which I think a lot of people can relate to. You know that feeling when you're so worried about not sleeping that you actually prevent yourself from relaxing.
Exactly. We get trapped in a vicious cycle. Carnegie suggests getting out of bed and doing something else. If you can't sleep, read a book. Listen to calming music. Practice gentle stretches, anything to quiet the mind.
He also talks about the power of prayer and meditation for calming the mind and promoting sleep. It sounds like taking a mental break is key.
Exactly. And physical activity can be a great way to do that. Exercise releases endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects and can help us sleep more soundly when we do finally go to bed.
You know, as we're talking about all these different techniques, I'm noticing a pattern in a lot of the stories Carnegie shares. It seems like many people found a sense of purpose and relief by helping others.
That's a really insightful observation, and it aligns with a lot of research on happiness and well-being. Studies show that people who engage in altruistic behavior tend to experience greater life satisfaction and lower stress levels.
So maybe focusing on others' needs can actually help us manage our own worries. It's like we're tapping into this wellspring of compassion and purpose that shifts our perspective.
It's a powerful antidote to worry. When we focus outward, we connect with something larger than ourselves, which can be incredibly healing.
It's like we're training our minds to be more resilient. But Carnegie also emphasizes that worry is a habit, and breaking any habit takes effort. He even breaks down how we worry, showing us those patterns we might not even realize we're falling into.
He calls it borrowing trouble. When our minds jump to conclusions, often without all the facts, we create these elaborate worst-case scenarios, even though there's no evidence to support them.
Our minds are like expert storytellers, but sometimes they go a bit overboard with the drama.
And Carnegie suggests we become detectives of our own worries, investigating them. To separate fact from fiction, he lays out a 3-step process. Get all the facts, analyze those facts carefully and logically, and then make a decision based on your analysis. Take action.
He shares an example of a businessman who was convinced his company was going bankrupt. He was so stressed he was having panic attacks.
But when he actually sat down and looked at the numbers, he realized his fears were totally unfounded. The company was doing just fine. Once he saw the facts clearly, the worry vanished.
It's like we create our own suffering by letting our imaginations run wild. Taking a step back and examining the situation objectively can be incredibly freeing.
And that's where the 3rd step comes in, making a decision and taking action. Indecision, Carnegie argues, is one of the biggest fuels for worry.
It keeps us stuck in a loop of what-ifs and prevents us from moving forward. He tells a story about a student agonizing over a job offer. The poor guy couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. He was completely paralyzed by indecision.
And the irony is that no matter what decision he made, he would have been better off than staying stuck in that state of limbo.
Sometimes the best decision is simply to make a decision and move on. It's about taking control rather than being a victim of our circumstances.
Exactly. And Carnegie takes it a step further. By focusing on the power of our mental attitude, he basically says that our thoughts create our reality.
He quotes Emerson, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." So if we're constantly feeding our minds negative thoughts, it's no wonder we feel anxious and worried.
It's like we're on a steady diet of negativity, and then we're surprised when we don't feel great. But changing that thought pattern can feel overwhelming. It can't be as simple as just thinking happy thoughts all the time, right?
Well, it's not always easy, but it is possible to cultivate a more positive and constructive way of thinking. Carnegie talks about focusing on what we can control rather than dwelling on what we can't.
He also emphasizes the power of gratitude. Taking time each day to appreciate the good things in our lives can have a profound impact on our well-being.
He tells a story about a woman who was bedridden for a year due to a heart condition. Initially, she was devastated, but then she decided to make the most of her situation.
She started each day by listing everything she was grateful for: her family, her friends, the sunshine streaming through her window. This simple act of gratitude transformed her experience.
That's so powerful, choosing to focus on the light instead of the darkness.
It's all about perspective. We always have a choice in how we perceive our circumstances.
And sometimes that shift in perspective is all it takes to turn lemons into lemonade.
Speaking of lemonade, that leads perfectly into one of my favorite chapters. Carnegie argues that even when we face setbacks and challenges, we have the power to find meaning and opportunity in those experiences.
He tells this inspiring story of a woman whose husband was stationed at an army base near the Mojave Desert. During the war, she hated it there, but then she had this brilliant idea.
She opened a roadside stand, selling refreshments to soldiers. Passing through, it became a huge success. She transformed what she saw as a misfortune into a thriving business.
It's like that saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But Carnegie takes it a step further. He says, if you have a lemon, make lemonade. Then find someone who has a grapefruit and make grapefruit juice. Then get together and start a citrus fruit business.
I love that. He's encouraging us to see challenges, not as roadblocks, but as opportunities for growth and creativity.
It's about turning those what-ifs into why-nots.
Exactly. That shift in mindset can be truly transformative. We can choose to be resourceful and find ways to thrive, even in difficult circumstances.
You know, as we were discussing all these strategies, I started thinking about something you mentioned earlier, about how Carnegie focuses on individual efforts to overcome worry. It seems like a lot of the people in his stories found strength and resilience, not just through individual effort, but also through their relationships with others.
That's such a great point. Having a strong support network, friends, family, a therapist, a community, can make a world of difference in our ability to cope with stress and adversity.
So maybe that's the missing piece of the puzzle, the secret ingredient to the whole stop worrying and start living philosophy.
It's certainly a powerful element. When we connect with others, we tap into a source of strength and support that can help us navigate life's challenges with more grace and resilience.
It seems like opening up to others, sharing our burdens, can actually lighten the load.
Absolutely. There's something incredibly powerful about expressing our worries, fears, and anxieties, even if the person listening can't offer a solution. Simply voicing those thoughts can be incredibly cathartic.
It's like we're releasing some of that pent-up energy and creating space for new perspectives to emerge. You know, as we've been diving into Carnegie's wisdom, I've been struck by the timelessness of his advice. It's as relevant today as it was when the book was first published decades ago.
It's true. Worry and anxiety are universal human experiences.
Yeah.
No matter what era we live in, we all face challenges, uncertainties, and setbacks. And Carnegie's strategies provide a framework for navigating those difficulties with more grace and resilience.
It's like he's giving us a set of tools for our mental and emotional toolbox. And just like with any tool, it takes practice to use them effectively.
Exactly. It's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of worry-free bliss. It's about developing healthy habits and coping mechanisms that help us manage worry and prevent it from taking over our lives.
And one of the things I find so encouraging about Carnegie's approach is that he emphasizes progress over perfection. He acknowledges that there will be days when we slip up, when those worries creep back in.
Absolutely. The key is to be kind to ourselves when that happens. We don't need to berate ourselves for having human emotions. We simply acknowledge those worries, learn from the experience, and keep practicing those techniques that help us find balance and peace of mind.
It's like building a muscle. The more we exercise those worry-busting muscles, the stronger they become. And maybe the most important muscle we can strengthen is the one that allows us to connect with others, to reach out for support when we need it.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Because just like with physical exercise, we don't have to go it alone. We can find support from friends, family, therapists, support groups, and our communities.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with?
I think it's the empowering realization that we have more control over our worries than we often believe. We can choose to challenge our negative thoughts, shift our perspectives, and build healthy habits that promote peace of mind. And just as importantly, we can cultivate meaningful connections that provide support and strength. On this journey,
Beautifully said. And remember, you don't have to tackle this all at once. Start with one small step today. Whether it's practicing gratitude, setting a stop-loss on a particular worry, or reaching out to a friend for support. Every step you take, no matter how small, is a step towards a more fulfilling and worry-free life.
that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And to our listener, thank you for bringing us these fascinating excerpts. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and tools for conquering those worries and living a more peaceful and joyful life.